Good morning, afternoon, evening, you guys. Hello. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Selina Sanders, and I teach a course on Domestika, on upcycling. And I'm just so excited to see you guys here today because I want to share a couple more ideas on how to kind of create and curate a sustainable wardrobe. The course I actually teach on Domestika is based on basically my business model, which is really using sustainable materials, meaning I make clothing from found items, mainly home goods. So we're talking about bed sheets, table runners, curtains, a lot of things that are pretty much forgotten textiles that end up in the landfill. And the fashion industry has such a huge footprint in terms of wastes and production and overproduction, frankly. So I've been in the industry for quite a while now. I have over 16 plus years of experience in the fashion industry, designing for various corporations prior to starting my brand, Selina Sanders. And I'm actually known mainly on my upcycling of tea towels and making them into puff sleeve tops. I'm actually wearing one right now, and this is the pattern. I'll back up a little bit. This is the pattern that I use for the course with Domestika. It's made out of an embroidered table runner. And then also these are just vintage bed sheets that I had upcycled to make this top. And then there's also like a more summer friendly version of that. So you can see it in here. I used a tablecloth and I show all of that in my course on Domestika. So if you are interested in starting your own sustainable journey towards building a more responsible wardrobe, or if you have been thinking about wanting to express yourself but trying to find that outlet, this is the course for you, especially because we are very much in this state now where trends come and go, but in reality, what is the longevity of our style and our self-expression? And that is all the things that we cover on my course with Domestika. And so I just wanted to thank the team at Domestika for inviting me to do this live with you, because other than these very, sort of one of a kind blouses that we make, we also venture on a lot of other silhouettes. And these are basically things that I am extremely passionate about because having pieces in your wardrobe that will last the test of time is really important to me. So when I was approached by Domestika to do this live, we had a conversation as to what I should be doing today and what should I be sharing with you guys. And I'm already gearing up for fall. I'm based in Altadena, California, here in the United States. Uh, I'm always constantly thinking, obviously, about the times changing. Although I am a lot more fortunate that I can actually wear things that can layer, in a sense that our winters are pretty mild out here. But we do get some chilly nights. And so one of my favorite pieces, pieces of staple items in my wardrobe is a sweatshirt. And I don't know any of you who you may not own one, but a lot of us do. So if you, for some reason, don't have a sweatshirt, let's just imagine we're talking about a t-shirt. It is as basic as it gets. And I have a lot of ideas on how to upcycle it, refashion it, revive it, rework it in order for you to be able to have an updated piece of garment in your wardrobe. Maybe it's an item that you just love so much, you wear it so much, it's gone through the kind of like the pains of just the wear and tear of wearing an item for a long time. And I think it's really important that before you toss it, or don't toss it, or donate it to a charity shop, or the Goodwill, as we call it here in the United States, why don't you do something about it in order to revive it? So today we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to give you some examples. So this cutie behind me is a pillowcase originally. So this is a sweatshirt that I had thrifted. I'm still trying to get used to this camera. I think I gotta move it this way. Okay. So if you can see a little bit closer, it's actually a pillowcase, but it's fully tufted. And that's basically just another way of creating kind of a rug texture. And basically, I just took the front panel out of this sweatshirt. So you can see it's just your average sweatshirt. And I basically just replace the front with this really kind of amazing piece of art. And I'm such a big fan of dogs and a big dog lover. And so this resonates with me and it makes sense to me and what I love. So finding something at a vintage store, charity store, wherever you might find antique or even donated pieces, or even an old pillowcase that you might have that you don't have any use for anymore. That is like the perfect thing to be able to use this application for things like jackets, t-shirts. Again, we're talking about a sweatshirt. So that's one example. All right, thank you, my friend. Push this out here real quick, and then I'm gonna just kind of move the camera around a little bit so that you can see. So I want to share with you other examples on this. So let me see if I can pull up. There we go. Thank you so much. So here on the table is another more complicated way of upcycling a sweatshirt. Again, one that's from a thrift store. This one I just bought off of the Goodwill bin. And this is, if you guys live in the United States, you know what I'm talking about. It's basically a place where you buy garments and then they weigh it and you pay by the pound, which is really great because this is the last stop before it gets into the landfills, incinerated. We only sell the charity shops in the United States only sell about 20% of the clothing that they receive. And so part of it, either not a lot of it actually, gets upcycled to make into fibers for insulation and recycled fibers. But really, at the end of the day, about 60 to 70% of those clothing won't be able to be used for anything else. So most of the time it ends up in the landfill or it is incinerated. So the Goodwill bins is a perfect like last stop defense before it goes to the next level of recycling process. And so when we can go to the bins to grab these things and try to save them, that is the perfect way, at least for my brand, on how to do it. And so we wash everything, hand dry, UV rays, kind of disinfectant, and then we prepare everything and highly curate a selection of things to applique on top. So before I actually dive into this example, which we offer in our brand, let me show you maybe things that you can do at home, because this is the whole point of this demonstration, is to just, I'm going to show you examples, but let me also show you the things that you can do, things that are very tangible and applicable, and things that are accessible maybe to you. So I'm going to set this aside for a second, and I will pull up like maybe just a blank sweatshirt, and then we can kind of go from there. So here, if you can look down on my camera, is another blank sweatshirt that maybe is stains. Like if you can see in here, it's already showing some some kind of holes and tears in there already. So other common wear and tear are obviously stains. You can also find a whole slew of issues that you might have but don't want to give up a piece of garment because you love how it fits. It has sentimental value, the memories and all that stuff, which I love. So one very easy thing is just a quick applique. And when you have things that are found within the space that you're in, whether it's something you already do, or you have scrap pieces of fabric, or you may be going down the antique store and you find pieces of items, rescue them. Here are just some examples of beautiful handkerchiefs. I also do an upcycled silhouette in the summer, um, on how I upcycle these beautiful pieces of, technically to me, they're textile artworks. So it's quite easy actually to be able to just applique it on. And I mean, this is just the most straightforward way of doing it, is basically picking the center of your sweatshirt and, doing a quick stitch around, and you already have a new piece of garment that later on, if you get tired of it, you can always unpick the stitch and have it back to where it used to be. So let me just show you a couple of things. And even if you decide that seems to be the most straightforward thing, is to put one in the middle and be done. But I mean, there's so many other ways to kind of think outside the box. So you don't always have to applique it on in this angle. I mean, how cool would that even be to perhaps, kind of do it at a more interesting angle. So imagine cutting this in half and then appliquing it one on this side. So imagine like a kind of like a silhouette sort of going into a V, and then the other side splicing it right there. So just to give you a more visual look to what that might look like, that makes for a really cool new piece, doesn't it though? I mean, I love it. The other thing is, if you are a little bit more advanced, you can always take out this neckline band, and it's just as easy as taking a seam ripper and just ripping off the seams, taking it off, and then you can always make like more of a yoke style. So you would applique it on this way, right? And then just sort of stitching it back on. So that look is also quite fabulous for an upcycle. So that's, vintage handkerchiefs are one of those things that if I find them and I think that the price is fair, I always grab them. Or again, when you go to the Goodwill bins, for my audience today that are based in the United States, it's a perfect resource because you can always find things like scarves, hankies, and all that good stuff. So application, or appliquing, the process of attaching a fabric on top of something, stitching it down, is a great way. And of course, you can do this in all skill levels. So if you don't have a sewing machine, just grab a needle and thread and do a basic basting stitch. And again, if you have a piece of paper, you can write this down. You can find everything on YouTube as far as like basic basting stitch, and if you go back on my Instagram today, I will give you guys a couple of links on basic stitching YouTube videos, because I think that would be extremely helpful. And sewing around the neck, and how you would do that, again, how would we go around the neck, is basically we will, just to kind of clarify for you guys who might be wondering, right? So once you take the band out, you can go ahead and pin this piece. And I'm just going to grab some pins just so that you can kind of see. Pick the middle part, obviously, and this is the middle of the hanky. So how I determine the middle of the sweatshirt is just fold it in half. And when you're folding it in half, you can kind of feel that middle and then just put a pin where that middle part is, right? I'm going to do this actually the right way. So let's do that first before I jump ahead. I have a lot to share with you guys, and so forgive me if I'm trying to go super fast. It's better to probably just go slow so that, we can actually take away some like really cool skills from our demo today. So this is how you determine the middle of your garment. You fold it in half. Make sure that you check the seams, that they are lined up. And armpit seams, as you can see, are pretty lined up. Side seams are pretty lined up. So line those up. And of course, you want to just sort of shimmy and flatten and check your shoulder seams too. Look, my shoulder seams aren't lined up, but I'm going to line them up right now. And with that, you can take a piece of pin and then just kind of carefully sort of mark your center front. And this is when you know that that's your center front. And then you can then take a ruler and then you can keep pinning, or you can also use a washable marker or one of those markers. I have one. It's called, these are so cool, you guys. These are called a pilot friction. And basically what happens is whatever mark you have, it actually disappears with heat. I wouldn't go crazy though, because I've heard that in the winter, it can come back when it starts to get super cold. I've never had that experience. So I love these pens. And you can just kind of mark it, you know, where it might be, just like little dots. And then with a iron, it disappears. So that's one trick I use personally. So right after you determine the middle of the sweatshirt, then you can take your applique, you know, and determine the center of this applique as well. Fold it in half and then do the same thing. So you're going to be marking again with a pin. You can go ahead and mark the center, and then that's how you line it up, right? Then it's all, let's just imagine that we've already cut this in half. I'm not going to cut it in half for this demonstration because I will use this for another project. So once you line it up, you can pin around. You've determined where you want this hanky to be. You can pin around. And then you can turn it inside out. So this has already been pinned. So let's just imagine, okay, that this has already been taken off, the band. The band is gone. So I'm going to turn it in actually. So let's pretend that this band is off. So once this is all pinned up, you can go ahead and now cut this piece, basically the piece of the hanky. And then you can go ahead and hand stitch the hanky in place so that it doesn't move. Go ahead and stitch it. And then right after that, you can go back and attach the neckband where it was before. And this is how you basically do that. So let's just imagine that we have so let's imagine that this is our, the edge of our neck. And then we've got our neckband, which is right here. I'm using this webbing because it's very similar to what a neckband is. So let me just actually fashion a curve for the neckband. This is just extra fabric that I've cut from the doggy guy from earlier today. So let's just pretend that this is, I need something a little bit more curved. At any time, please ask me or let me know if this is very confusing to you. But let's just pretend that that is our neckband. You've already put the hanky right here, right? So let's pretend this is our hanky. And I said, go ahead and pin it. I love working with these like little mock-ups because then we don't have to destroy something like that one and not be able to use it for something else later. So let's just say I've pinned it, and then we talked about cutting around, right? We've already. Just be careful with your fingers when you're doing this application. Okay. So let's imagine that this is that hanky, right? This is your arm. Your arms are right here. Now you've taken the neckband out. Remember, this was our neckband. You took it out. You've now appliqued this on. You've hand stitched it or machine stitched it. It's really up to you. And then you basically take the same neckband, which is really a ring. There's no, right? It's like a ring out there. And you basically just do the same thing. You figure out half, like what is, so let's just say, you're going to want to determine also halfway, fold it in half and match the end, the top of the neck, basically the bottom of the neck on this side and then that side. Go ahead and stretch it out, and then you'll pin it in place. Sew it, single needle stitch it with your sewing machine. You can also do it by hand, basting stitch, really small basting stitches by hand, and then turn it over. Again, this is obviously just a mock-up so you can see. And then there's your neckband. Back in place. Okay. So that's one way of basically trying to, and the reason why I love doing this part is it makes it look a lot more professional compared to maybe just appliquing something on top of something. I feel like that's the most common way of doing it. And for me, I like to actually think about other ways to maybe think outside the box, you know? So that's one way. So let me just turn, actually, let's find a different color to kind of freshen our palette for a second. Here's a good one. Okay. The ones actually that are kind of abundant are sweatshirts that have a ton of printing. Like you'll find things that say like maybe you don't have any connection to like Lake Tahoe, right? So these are things that you might buy from a thrift store but are not excited from it. So it's very easy to applicate things on. Um, Again, a hanky is a really great example. And then another great example is just quilt pieces. You can find an abundance of these at thrift stores that are unfinished, and it's perfect because you can just mask or cover up any sort of imperfections. And how cute is that? So one question I get asked all the time too is, what about if I have a cuff that's been worn out? I love this combination of maybe appliquing something on and then taking basic sewing stitching to kind of mask some of this problem. So it's really up to you if you want to do visible mending, which means you want to show what you've mended, or you want to hide the flaw. So let's just say I want to hide it. I don't want to highlight it. So make sure to get embroidery floss that is usually used in needlework and embroidery. And they usually come in these sort of form. You can also find them like in a ball. There are an abundance of these at thrift stores. You just have to kind of keep your eye out or buy them secondhand through eBay or Etsy or wherever you get your secondhand resource. So if I want to do that, I can just pick a color. But for the sake of our demo, why don't we do something a little fun? Why don't we pick maybe an orange that could match this part? So what I do, just take your needle and pull out some floss. When I do this too, I don't do it way too long, because what happens is it tangles. So make sure you just do it kind of at an arm's length. You see how this is just at an arm's length, how long my floss is. And I need to find a needle that has a bigger hole in it so that we can do this a little faster. Give me 1 second. I think I pinned it in this. Okay, there it is. Thank you for your patience for a little interruption. So go ahead and pull it through. I'm just cutting off these ends. So here we are. Make sure you knot it at the end. And again, I'll put some links on my Instagram today on some really great YouTube resources for embroidery. And just imagine that this cuff is all worn out. I mean, it's getting there. So it usually happens at this edge right here because it's folded in half, and that's where you get a lot of rubbing and in day-to-day life. So while I'm working, please let me know if you have any questions. But basically, I'm going to try to pull it through and make this sort of like, it almost looks like you're trying to wrap around it. So I personally, there's a question that came through. Do you prefer visible stitching or a hidden stitch? Personally, for me, I embrace mending so much, and I get so excited when I buy a piece of vintage fabric that, or a piece of vintage dress that someone's made and they've mended it already, because it really does show a sense of history and personality within the garment that you wouldn't like really find anywhere else. It's like a stamp someone's put into a garment. So I romanticize the idea of mending. I feel like I imagine the person who was there doing this because they loved a garment so much that they just kept mending it. And I find myself doing that with my own clothes. I get excited when there's a tear or something that I can mask. And so, yes, I love visible mending. There are obviously people who don't like that. So that's your solution. Grab a floss that's the same color. And when you do this, it won't really show. But for me, I mean, how cool. I'm not going to finish the whole thing so we can move on to the next thing. But how cool is that, to see the mending kind of picked up from the applique on here? It just adds to the personality, and really you've already fixed the garment and added some personality to it. So there's an option. Now, let's just say you do not have any embroidery skills whatsoever. I love this solution. And that is super easy. And what you just need is one basic thing, which is your old sweatshirt. Let me just clean up after my station here. And some fabric markers. So here, let's just imagine that that's a blank sweatshirt. And I am going to grab our fabric markers. So you can find them at a lot of craft stores. And these are fabulous because they're permanent markers. All you need to do is draw on something, and literally you dry it in 24 hours. I think it's 24 hours or 40. Oh yeah, let dry for 24 hours. It's machine washable, but it's best on white or light colored fabrics. But if you don't have any light colored fabrics, I mean, you can make your own applique, right? The other thing I love to do is I go to these vintage stores and I find these embroidery kits, where I can make my own applique. So it's either I trace those or I copy them. But let's just pretend that I found this and I want to applique it on, and I don't like, I don't have the time to do embroidery. Why don't I just do mock embroidery? So I've gotten this kit already includes usually like an instruction on how to do it and all that stuff. I'm not going to do that because we're not embroidering. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of mimic what it looks like. And I have my trusty fabric markers, and I'm going to go ahead and maybe do a little bit of drawing. So I'll take my fabric marker and I will go ahead and mimic. I love this, you guys. This makes me happy because, I mean, look at that. Basically, I don't have to embroider. It's so fast. I've done a lot of embroideries. They take a long time. They're also enjoyable, but I'm a Libra who likes instant gratification, and sometimes my patience isn't really quite there. So already, just with fabric markers, you're getting a pretty cool piece of, your own kind of like textile coloring book, right? I'm gonna grab a green. Okay, I have a question. When sewing a woven applique onto a stretch top, how do you minimize the top from stretching? That is an excellent, excellent question. I'm going to go ahead and just finish this, and I'll show you. That's going to be part of my demo, actually, on how to kind of do that to minimize the stretching. All right, so that's pretty self-explanatory, right? This is an amazing piece of in your arsenal. I always suggest anybody that owns garments, you should all just purchase a kit. This will last you for years. And the reason why that is because you can mask any stains. Like I work with tea towels quite a bit, for maybe you guys that follow me on my social media, and I always get tea towels that are stained, and I always use these as sort of a way to mask it without spending too much time reviving a piece. So the question about applying a non-stretch garment to, a non-stretch woven applique onto a stretch top is quite important, because you obviously you want it balanced, right? So, what I usually do is, if I can, all right. Sorry, guys, things are kind of a little disorienting. Okay. So this right here is a pattern of my applique. This is woven. So let's just pretend that this is my applique. And this is my sweatshirt, which is not woven. It is stretch. But what we want before we do an application on is we want to keep things flat, undisturbed. And we do a couple of measurements before we apply something on top of something. So what I would do is I would go ahead and measure my sweatshirt from armpit to armpit and kind of figure that out, what that measurement is. And then I have my applique, which is very rigid. It doesn't stretch. But I also want to determine that I'm not stretching this out as I am applying this on top. So I make a template or a guide to basically keep things in check. So I know after measuring that I have a 2.25 on each side. That's basically the kind of the frame that I've had for myself here. So what happens then is I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of my applique. This one already has seam allowance in it, which means I turned it. I used the 3/8 seam allowance. I cut my template and then I turned it. And that's when you get this clean finish, as you see it in there. So what happens is as soon as I kind of determine the placement, I go ahead and get my applique. and then I put it on top, and then I go back to check that it is in the right spot, and then I pin it. And as soon as I'm like starting to sew, once in a while, I'll stop to check. I constantly check to make sure I'm not like stretching the fabric, or I'm not like going outside of my perimeter. Hopefully that's very clear. Sometimes it gets really, really advanced in a sense that if you have a big applique you're applying on top, it becomes difficult to do. But when you have little appliques or like a handkerchiefs and stuff like that, the key is do not stretch your fabric as you're sewing. Always keep everything relaxed and always pin things as much as possible to prevent something from moving. The other way too, and this is a really great tip that I learned from fashion school, is before you applique something on, you can go ahead and basically hand stitch your applique on first onto the garment, and then that way it doesn't move when you're sewing. And when you hand baste or put something in place that's like hand stitched, you can try it on to see if it's doing any stretching or moving around. And that's when you know you're ready to sew, once you've done the hand application. So the other thing too that I kind of want to quickly talk about is color coordination. One thing that I've spoken about in my Domestika course, which is not just about making the garment, but making sure that when you're upcycling, you're taking something that's existing and you're elevating its existence, right? That's what upcycling means. And unfortunately, and I'm also a victim of this, I've done projects in the past where I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? That does not look good. The combinations don't look good. The colors don't look good. So as soon as I learned that lesson, I abide by very, very simple rules. And that is commonality and kind of the basically like how do things end up complementing each other. So, and actually I've got like a color example in here. So this crazy quilt is the inspiration basically to my sweatshirts, and that's why we do a lot of these crazy quilt stitchings. Um, Notice the color in here and how kind of unusual they all are, but they work together, meaning like there is this pink in here, and then there's this bright blue, but then there's navy, and then there's red. But for some reason it works. And how it works really is they're using thread that actually picks up some of the color. So notice this is this pink right here, picking up the pink from here. So just use those little tricks. And at the end of the day, you are going to wear this garment, so it should please you and no one else. So for example, I have this blank sweatshirt. I love this pillowcase that was never finished, and I'm going to be using it as an applique. So I can actually decide if I'm going to use this colorway, or maybe take one, which this sweatshirt, maybe it has some writing in it that doesn't speak to you anymore. Maybe it was a cool sweatshirt that you wore a long time ago, or you got it as a company uniform, or sometimes they make those, you ever work for a company and they want you to wear company swag and you want to cover it up. So there's two different interpretations on how you want to take this. Again, the potential of upcycling is wonderful because it really does open your mind to make you creative and be a lot more resourceful in terms of that. So another question we have is, how would you recommend cleaning the sweatshirt before we make them at home? Excellent question. I love that. So sweatshirts for sure for those of you who might know me, I am a big believer of washing everything by hand and soaking them for a while. Again, these garments go through many, many different stages. So it's really best to clean them, obviously, before you work with them. I use for these, because they're cotton and a poly blend, usually they can take hot water. So I boil water and I soak them. I literally soak them. I don't really agitate as much. I just use a plant-based soap, a mild plant-based soap, one that I like how it smells, like a lavender scent or something. And then I use baking soda and I basically just soak them. For you guys too, you can also use basically like a powder bleach. I've used OxyClean in the past, but there are more sustainable brands out there, and I can also link those in my Instagram, because there's a lot of them that make them a lot more sustainably. It's not like the laundry industrial complex necessarily. So just soak them and then hang them out, sun dry if you have any like access to the sun. And then for the applications themselves, I do the same thing, but I don't use hot water. I use cold water, and I also soak. And for soaking, it really just depends on how much you want to take out of a garment. Like for sweatshirts, I usually give them a good like 30-minute soak. I really make like soap spuds and I agitate that water, make it hot, put the baking soda in there. And baking soda really helps get rid of odors. Baking soda helps with basically it's a disinfectant. It counteracts all the oil stains and all that stuff. And then in terms of these appliques, some of them are maybe wool. Obviously, these are probably acrylic. And if the person that you bought it from didn't do a good job with backing it, it could fall apart really and literally. So agitation is also not a good idea for this. So I use cold water and then I do the same soaking process. But I don't normally put like oxidated or kind of powder bleach. I don't do any of that. I just use the mildest thing possible, plant-based soap, baking soda, and that usually takes care of it. There may be an occasion where you will find something that runs, like meaning like a color will transfer to the back. And I usually do like a little test, especially if I can tell that when I bought it, it's already running a little bit. I'll do a test. And if the thread runs or the color washes off, I don't normally stay away from those and I'll dye them or do something else that might not, affect other fabrics. So I will take a couple more questions. Otherwise, the time went by really, really fast. And we will soon be wrapping up. And I really appreciate you guys spending the time with me today. But okay, hello, Lucille. She has a question from Facebook. Do you sew it on the sweatshirt with the sewing machine? It really just depends on your skill level. I would consider someone who's been sewing for over 20 years. And so for me, I usually do all of my sewing with the machine. But anybody who is starting and is a little bit worried, I suggest you hand stitch everything on, try it on. And if you love it, go ahead and use the sewing machine to just like really make it strong. Otherwise, when you're using hand stitching, just make your stitches quite small and then occasional mending is expected. And also people watching from Portugal, Switzerland, the UK, India, Ireland, Atlanta, Minnesota, and Greece. I basically, I'm just like really excited to know that there's so many people who are on the stream today, basically sharing with us. There are so many of you out there, and I'm just like so incredibly amazed that that we can have this conversation on a global stand. I am from Altadena, California, so it's really incredible. Yeah, if you have last minute questions, please put them through. Otherwise, I would love for you guys to check me out on Instagram, Selina_Sanders. And I'm also on TikTok, on Facebook. And I'm constantly sharing ways to help you guys think about exciting and fun little tidbits that you could do to upgrade your wardrobe, live a more sustainable and eco-friendly life, and really looking at textiles and finding their potential. I highly recommend that you check out my course on Domestika. I am so excited to see all the different projects that have already come through our Domestika course out there. You can just find me there, Selina Sanders, on Upcycling Fashion. And thank you so much for watching. Hopefully we'll connect again soon. Thank you.